Today, I'm going to tear down a suspected bad engine out of a 2017 Jaguar F-Pace, which is their SUV. This is the 3-liter supercharged V6, which is based on the Ford AJ architecture that dates all the way back to the late 90s. It was in the Lincoln LS, the S-Type, the Thunderbird. Lots of vehicles use this architecture. In fact, this exact engine is offered in lots of Jaguar models, the XJ, the XF. It's also offered in some Land Rover vehicles as well. It's a 340 horsepower, supercharged, direct injected dual overhead cam, all aluminum V6 that puts out 340 horsepower, which for being literally 75% of the V8 variant seems pretty on par, although those engines make 500 horsepower, which begs the question, why? Cost. I read the comments, and I can feel the disappointment when I don't know the details on the engine I'm tearing down, like the mileage. This has 62,000 miles on it, which is pretty low considering this is out of a 2017 that was built in 2016. 62K is pretty low, but this engine is out of a car that was stolen and recovered. It was also crashed at some point after it was stolen, and we all know that the people who drive stolen cars make sure that they're full of oil. They put the proper fuel in it, like premium. They pay attention to all the gauges. They don't drive it hard when it's cold. You know, they take care of things. Nope. They don't do any of those things. They literally drive it until it won't drive anymore, and I'm pretty sure that's what happened here. So my guys turned this thing over with the starter when it was still bolted to the transmission, and they told me that it cranks like there's no plugs in it, but there were plugs in it, which is bad. So I'm going to show you some things I found as I was kind of preemptively taking a few things off of this to make tonight a little easier. The first thing that jumped out at me is this. This is the coolant crossover pipe, which never has any problems on these engines. Wait, no, I'm kidding. This is a very common failure on both the V6 and the V8 models, especially when they're plastic. That has a hole in it. Not only does that have a hole in it, there's also a hole right here. So we may be dealing with an overheat situation. It could be a timing related problem, or, you know, there's no law that says there could only be one thing wrong with the car. Same applies for an engine. Well, you guys know the way this works. We are going to start by pulling the plugs. Well, nothing is smashed or broken. The plugs don't look, I mean, that one's a little wet, but they don't look too terrible. However, I want to show you the coils because two of them, they're melty. I think this thing got hot.
So hot.
Next, let's take a look at this oil filter. Before I even show you the filter, I have to comment on the way that the crankcase smells, or at least the smell that came out of this. It's awful. And not like oil doesn't smell good awful, but like it's putrid. Okay. Well, there's a few tiny shiny speckles, but it's not like it's packed with bearing material. I don't see any other foreign objects in here. It's not terrible, although, you know, any metal is not good. We have certainly seen worse on this channel. The next thing I need to do is remove this fuel line because we need to start taking the supercharger off. Oh, sweet. Didn't even need glue yet. So this top piece has water to air heat exchangers or intercoolers in them, and they still have still very much have coolant in them, as I've just found out. Let's take a look inside this thing. I don't see any foreign matter except for this. That's not supposed to be there. And of course, it's standard to have oil in here. It's got crankcase ventilation. This moves freely. The lobes on the blower look pretty good, so that's nice. And onto the other side, more of this junk. Now we're going to divert our attention to the caboose of this engine because we need to get this off, which means we need to take this coolant crossover pipe. I'm sure that one's super fun in the car. Oh, that's interesting. That's not supposed to happen. Oh, that's bad. So that's melted. Not only is that melted, I don't know if you can really tell, but the inside of that has crunchy melted plastic in it. And on the other side, that's melted. There, I fixed it. That is, that got hot. Let's pull this apart. Oh, look at this goo in here. It's like grease. That doesn't go there. Now we can finish pulling the rest of this, which I think this is all crankcase ventilation. Looks like we got one connector. And of course, the locking tab faces in. So you can't just, use your hands. You have to use a screwdriver, which I love doing so much. Yeah. That looks like a nice part. I don't know, this might be worth something. Unlikely. While we're in the neighborhood, let's just get some of these fuel line brackets. There now. That can hang low.
And wave it to and fro.
Next, we need to get this coolant manifold off. And this is a thermostat housing. We're going to get that off so we can pull the supercharger off. Ooh, that came off really easily. Ooh, I don't think I have the right pliers for these clamps. What are we going to do? What could we possibly do in that scenario to get these super expensive? Or we can just pull on that and that just falls out. And then, will this work? Hey, look at that. And we're off. Now it's time to unbolt the supercharger from the engine. Is there more? Nope, I think that's it. And there's some coolant pipes, I'm sure. Oh, no coolant pipes. It just comes off. One other thing I wanted to show you guys is the play in the coupler. That's a little more than I'd like to see. But the good news is you can replace that coupler and they're not very expensive. Let's take a look in these intake ports. For a DI engine, yeah, that doesn't look too good. We've certainly seen worse. Ooh, that one's really wet, but that could be the oil that just came out of that supercharger when I broke the seal loose. That one looks oddly worse. While we're in this area of the engine, you can clearly see there's supposed to be a bore here, and there is one on a V8, but on the V6, there isn't. Instead, they have these little hot pockets here. Now let's see if we can get these injectors out. Now on the last V8 I did, the 5-liter supercharged, these injectors were not fun, but I do have a tool now if I need to get them out. First, let's see if the rail will pull them up. This is unlikely, but wait a minute. Well, 2 out of 3, that's not bad. Well, I was able to get that one out by just rotating it with my hands. This is not the tool I was talking about. Don't read that wrong. Now we can remove this valve cover. See, I think these just pop right off. No, that's not going to happen. There we go. Well, this really doesn't look too bad in here. Plenty of tension on the chain. It doesn't smell good at all. It smells like, whoa. I think I could have gone without that. But I don't see anything, nothing terrible. I just smell things that are terrible. While we're here, let's get this exhaust manifold off.
Wait, Torx.
Did that help me? Nope, still got an 8 left. There we are. Now, I covered this in the 5-liter teardown, but the fasteners that hold the exhaust manifold on and also hold the main caps on, these blade bolts, this is not a standard Torx bit. I mean, it is a Torx bit, but it's not a Torx bit. It's not Torx at all, actually. And it is actually, I think, the head bolt tool for a Volkswagen or an Audi engine. Either way, that was tough to find last time, but now I have it. Yeah, that's what I wanted to do. Before we move off of this bank, I want to get this cover off here. It's stuck in a dowel. Success. And I don't really see anything too wrong in here. Now, in the last AJ I tore down, I didn't really know what this was for because, well, I didn't know what I was doing. Turns out this is for sucking the oil out of the crankcase so you don't have to drain it out of the pan.
It's pretty cool.
The next thing that needs to happen is I need to remove other parts of the fuel system, the rail and injectors, and then this line here, which is my least favorite design aspect of this engine. It is dismal. I can't tell you how much I don't like this, and I'll show you why in a second. First, let's get this loose. And we'll just loosen this up just because we can. Okay, get this cover off. Just bracket right here. Pressure lines off. 1, 2. There's another bolt right here. All right, now we need to take this 8. Now I can explain why I think this is a terrible design. So this is all one piece all the way down to the fuel pumps, which are located on the oil pan. And we'll get that apart later, but this line assembly here, this whole thing tucks behind the engine mount bracket and some other brackets over on this side of the engine. And if you notice, you can't get this off that easily. This is still very firmly mounted, and I might have missed a bolt. Did I miss a bolt? I don't know what is still holding this in other than everything. But this is all one piece. It does disconnect here, but this line, it's all one piece. You have to bend this out of the way to get the valve cover off, which means you have to compromise the metal of the fuel system to remove a valve cover. You know what? I'm going to pause the video here for just a second because I actually dug into what it takes to remove this passenger valve cover the correct way. And what the book says is you're supposed to drop the subframe, remove the passenger motor mount bracket and motor mount itself, just to get that line loose so that you can remove the passenger valve cover. It's over 8 hours of labor to remove that passenger valve cover. And maybe it's not a big deal, but it just looks like a big deal to me. And now I'm going to try to carefully remove this component. There we go. So this looks innocent enough, but it is tucked behind a bunch of brackets, and I don't even know how you would get this out in the car. I don't think that's possible. Will we have the same luck with this bank of fuel injectors? Let's get old Blue on the task. Well, we got 1 of 3, so we're 4 of 6 out so far. Let's see if I can rotate these like I did on the other one. Oh, yes. Oh, no. There's always got to be one. It's always the last one you try. That worked. Now we will remove the passenger side or right side valve cover. Well, that side doesn't look as good, but that's because this is the side that has crankcase ventilation. Chain is taut. I don't see anything too terrible yet. Not a lot of places to pry on this. Much like the other side, the guides look good, which is rare for one of these, I guess. So everything looks pretty good in here. It's a little varnished, but it's really not, nothing's jumping out at me. It's really not that bad. I don't see any scoring on the cam lobes. There's no signs of moisture in here. Next, I'm going to go after the water pump. Oh, does this just come right off? Sure does. Ooh, still got some coolant in there. Probably, ooh. A little bit of play. It's still not bad. It looks like a pretty easy part to change too. Well, it might be a little more difficult in the car. But yeah, this isn't bad. While we're here, let's go ahead and take this oil filter housing apart. The reason I did that is I have to have access to one of the bolts. The head bolts is underneath the oil filter housing. Seems like a great place for it. Now I know we haven't barred this thing over yet, and I already knew that it had low compression and leak down tests were bad, so I knew the engine turned over, plus we got all the torque converter bolts out. But let's see what it feels like here. It's not bad. Oh, the big crank bolts. Now these are left-hand thread if I remember correctly. All right, I've got my puller on here and it's pretty much bottomed out. I only have maybe 1/8 of an inch to work with. Apparently that's all I need. And now I got to find some way to rig this up. All right, I put a bolt way back in the crank, in the snout of the crank, and then I use the shorter pushing rod. Like a glove. Now, hopefully I can get that bolt out. Otherwise, oopsies. Now let's pull this lower timing cover. Now this should just pry right off. Perfect. So this is all pretty simple well, it's a little on the complicated side. You've got 2 chains, then you've got your oil pump / fuel pump driving chain, and lots of plastic pieces in here, but everything looks like it's in really good shape. I don't see anything terribly wrong. I am going to try to turn this engine to where it is in top dead center so we can see if maybe the timing marks line up. But I have a feeling that it's not a timing related failure because everything looks pretty good in here. If it was a timing related failure, I would suspect there'd be some damage to some of the guides here. We'd see chips of plastic in here, and I think we'd see bent valves when we looked in the intake ports, which we did not see. I did my due diligence, lots of D's there, and I decided that this engine is in time. So we've got our timing mark here. Timing marks are here and here. And there. And there. And this could be out of time. I don't know. I'm not an expert at this. But this is just what I found in 5 minutes on the internet. Those are flat. There's a special tool that locks these cams in place. But if it is out of time, I don't think it's out of time enough for it to cause the compression issues that we saw when we did a test on this engine. Now it's time to peel the chains off of this thing, and we're going to start with the tensioners. Whoa, got stuff happening. That looks kind of dangerous. Oh, it was fine. Yeah, that's a good shape. Now, can anything come out of here? No, it's all just really loose. I haven't achieved anything. Oh, stuff's happening. Oh, we got parts ejecting. Well, that's just going to have to come out with that cam. Let's take a look at that rail that fell. God, I hope this didn't get damaged. There's not a lot of wear. It looks really good, but, 60,000 miles, I would expect it to look like this. Same deal with this. There's virtually no wear. I wonder if these are an updated design from the earlier 5-liter engines. Hopefully they last longer. That's where that tensioner pushes. I hear that that's a place where they can wear out. I have a great idea. Don't do this at home. Look at that. Like I said, don't do this at home. Heed my warnings. Yeah, these rails look they're pristine.
Can we get this off of here? And then this can go here, and then here.
Oh, I missed a bolt. Well, that would explain a lot of things. It's about to get way easier. Yeah, that thing's perfect. Chain. And that'll come out when I get the cams out. Now it's time to cram the caps loose. Those are the quietest cam cap bolts I've ever had. One thing I just noticed is that the caps have some Sharpie on them. Has this thing been apart before? You think someone's retimed this engine? I don't feel like I see any tool marks anywhere. Why don't you come off? Oh, there we go. So taking a look at the journals in the head, they don't really look too bad. But I really haven't suspected an oiling failure in this engine based on all the other things that we've looked at so far, like the filter. Caps look nice. I don't see any debris. No scratches in any of the journals. I don't know if these have any value, but they sure are in nice condition. I think we can get this chain out of the way now. Oh yeah. What a beaut. Yeah. Next we'll get this oil suction pipe out. Is this going to be like the dipstick tube and fight me? Hopefully not. Nope. Before I get to the big head bolts, I have some bolts around the perimeter of the head. Oh, these aren't even that tight. Not even tight at all. And there's 2 bolts at the back. Now it's time to crack the head bolts loose. Now I'm going to use this instead of my air because this I can be a lot more careful with. I don't want to tear up these journals. Oh, I can hear that gasket popping. It's starting to release. This should come right off. Oh, it almost fell off. Okay. Well. So I don't know if you can see that and that and that and that and that. Those are burn marks. And there's corresponding marks on the head gasket. So that would explain the compression problems. Oh yeah, these heads are not going to be any good, I guarantee it. But I'm worried about more things. I really am. It's pretty interesting. You can kind of see how there would be a cylinder in this location, but they just, for cost reasons, it costs a lot to make that extra one. Now we can take a look at the cylinder head, and you can definitely see it's burned right here, and here. And what's also interesting is that is a passage. That's supposed to be open. That's been my experience, And there's another one. And that's supposed to be bigger. So yeah, this is, that's like a nice surface there, but okay, this has to go through here. Yeah. I thought that was metal for a second, but nope. That's just a bunch of junk. There we go. See? Now what is this? What do you guys think this is? Besides that doesn't go there. Now the block and the pistons. Actually, the cross hatching is still very nice in that cylinder. It's really nice. But if you look, you see how that piston looks a little grainy, and so does that. That's probably because they got very hot. And I wouldn't be surprised if we find some piston damage when we get this rotating assembly apart. Now we can cram the other caps off. You know what? I'm just going to loosen these with the power. I'm sorry, they don't make any noise, guys. Now I am making sure I keep these caps in the correct order, so that way when I scrap these cylinder heads, they were scrapped, the correct way. I don't think I would sell these to anybody unless you really are desperate. I don't think these are going to be very nice. And I got my other beautiful chain. Same story on this cylinder head. The journals, buckets, all that stuff looks really nice. Not a lot of wear. I don't think this engine had any oiling issues. Cams look great. Caps look good. I hope these cams are worth some money. So I don't think I'm going to be able to sell the cylinder heads, but I don't know. Some of you guys that do this for a living, what do you think? You think those heads are going to be good after a catastrophic overheat? Next, we'll get some of these perimeter bolts out. Then the one that was underneath the oil filter housing. Now for the head bolts. Now, hopefully it's just like the other one. Oh, knock sensor, I forgot about you. Well. This one doesn't look good in this area either. There and there. Well, that would explain the low compression for sure. But now, it's time to do our test. It's time for some science. Ooh, that didn't feel right. I think that's okay. Now let's turn this short block over and make sure we don't have any bent rods. Maybe it collapsed a rod on its own coolant. But first, let's look at this other cylinder head. As you can see, these passages, whoa, almost knocked that head over. These passages are plugged up. Now, I don't see any cracks, but what I am going to do is we're going to run these through the parts washer. I don't know if these are known for cracking or just warping. And we'll get a better look. If there's something to show you, I'll show you at the end of the video. Let's do the left bank first. Everything looks relatively okay. And now the right bank. Man, look how dry that is. Uh-oh. I see trouble. So right there, that looks like some aluminum transfer from perhaps a distorted piston or a melted piston. Also signs of an overheat. All right, now we're going to drain the crankcase. This thing should be drained. The drain plug was loose. Should be in our, not always the same on this channel. Now, see, that could have been on my floor. But it doesn't look bad. I don't see any forbidden glitter in there. I don't see any coolant or water. It's just dark oil. And while we're waiting for this to drain, let's go ahead and get the feed line off of these fuel pumps. There we go. A little extra fuel. Now, what is this over here? It looks like dried up coolant. All right, now it's time to turn this thing over and make a giant mess. Here goes something. Oh no, we're leaking oil out of... That's bad. That's real bad. It's nothing some pig mat can't clean up. Let's get this vacuum pump out of the way first. Ooh, it's dropping stuff. What? I have no idea. That thing looks pretty good. Next, let's remove these fuel pumps.
Come back.
Yeah, this part looks all right. The one that fell out looks pretty good too. Now I'm pretty sure I have to take this off. A little balance there, counterbalance, and then, okay, I think I can get the chain off of this, maybe. Oh, I see how this works. Ow! Jerk. I can't remember how this comes apart. It's all a little foggy to me. So I think we're just going to start taking stuff apart and see what happens. Sounds like a good plan to me. Did I get them all? Let's see. I gotta get them all out at once. I do remember having to pull this out. Let's see what happens when I start prying on it. Oh, I think we're okay. Really nothing terrible inside the pan. Looks pretty clean in here. Now, this is the moment I've been waiting for. What is going on over here? Since there's no rods on the crank, there's just this big machined part, and then it's got this little bitty balance shaft, and this other little bitty balance shaft. And I guess that's enough to make it happy. The rest of this all looks like your standard 5-liter AJ. We'll just take this out, and then we'll pull this whole cartridge up. Probably not going to pull this apart. I think these are worth a little bit of money, and I don't suspect this had an oiling failure, so I don't see a big reason to take this apart. Yeah, I meant to do that. Now this chain just comes right off. Now we need to get this connector out of the block. Just give it a little tap. Got a better tool for this. A chisel driver. Perfect. Let's see if we can pull this all off in one piece. So I need to pull the pickup tube out and that tube right there. Both of those need to be removed. The good news is that both of those are easy. Little bit of oil in it. Nothing too bad. Let's try some things. Now, is that everything except for this bolt here? Oh yeah. Off in one big piece. Here's another look at the rear of the crankshaft. So normally you'd have two rods and pistons like this, Siamesed in here, but instead they just didn't machine that. The block isn't machined for that. It's just the same overall casting, and I guess it saved them money to do it that way. Now, without any other parts, just the rotating assembly, this turns over really nice. So let's go ahead and get it in position so we can get these first two rods and pistons out. Let's just fall right out.
Ooh, ooh, bad.
Turn it over for the next two. These things just fall right out. It's crazy. Two more. Oh, it turns out really nice now. Well, the rod bearings show wear on the thrust side of the bearing shells, but it's pretty consistent throughout. This one's flipped around, don't pay attention to that. It's pretty consistent throughout all of these. I don't see any major deep grooves. There's a few here and there, but it's not terrible, except for the fact that this engine only has 62,000 miles on it. It's a little worn for the mileage. Now the rods and pistons. This is... they have a slight tint to them, just a little bit of a barbecued. These things are cooked, absolutely cooked. These pistons are trash. I looked them over pretty well. I didn't see any major damage, but anything that got this hot could have distorted. If you look closely, see, I don't think it was in the first two. I think it was this one. Yeah, there you go. There's a little bit of damage to the piston, and then there's a cracked ringland or a damaged ringland right there. Will you focus? Come on, do what I say. There we go. It's broken. And that aluminum has transferred to the actual block. I'm sure we'll see that when we get to that. But yeah, I wouldn't use these. The amount of heat it takes to do this, to cook the oil, make it look like this. I mean, the end of the rod is cooked. There were some insane cylinder temperatures at this point. I've never seen pistons look like this, and I've torn down, 150 engines so far on this channel, and hundreds before that, and this is a first. And finally, it is time to take the main caps out. Huh, that is not drilled or bolted in. It's just cast over. I didn't even notice that until now. Same on that side. Oh yeah, those were tight. I remember this. I think I had to use the breaker bar on these. Let's rotate this over and crack these loose. Now I'm all right with this because this has not been a super poppy engine. I feel like you guys need a certain level of snap, crackle, pop when I take these things apart. Let's see if we can do this. I know this is a really long socket for this, and that's definitely going to be a detriment, but I think that one was loose. Am I losing my mind, guys? Okay, let's try this again. That's much better. I feel like this was also difficult on the last one. It looks like I could thread a slide hammer into this and pop these out, but we're going to do it the hard way instead. Tolerances are very tight on these. Well, it's a lot of work for the first one. Oh, it's going to be like that throughout, I think. Okay, and the one I'm most interested in is this. I don't know how this is going to come out, other than carefully. That wasn't too bad. Time to get the crankshaft out. So the main bearings look pretty good. I didn't think they wouldn't. They certainly look nicer than the rod bearings. Usually the rod bearings wear first. A little bit of wear on the rear two bottom shells, but not bad. And as you would expect, crankshaft is beautiful. This is probably one of the more valuable parts out of this engine. I don't think this was affected by the overheat. I think this would be a nice part to reuse. That's the part where the two journals would sit. It's really strange. And here's the rear main cap. And this rides, well, it rides like, no, it does ride like this. It's pretty crazy. Now let's take a look at the bores. So that one doesn't look too bad. That one looks pretty bad. Obviously the heat is usually in the center. And there's definitely some aluminum transfers and vertical scratches. You can definitely feel that with your fingernail. And also the rear cylinder. That's not good. Let's go to the other side. Front cylinder, again, a little bit of wear there. Some vertical scratches. But there's the big damage. That's super deep. Is not going to clean up with a dingleball hone. That's what I meant to say. Either one is not going to get the results that you want. And I don't know if you can overbore these or if you have to sleeve them. That one's got some pretty deep vertical scratches as well. Yeah, this block may not be worth saving. Also, there seems to be some substance melted in the cooling system here. Let's see what that is. I bet this is the same stuff that was plugging up those jackets. Ew! Who put asphalt in here? I can go fix some potholes. What is this? Is this oil and coolant mixed? But why did the rest of the coolant not look so bad? Wow, there's a large volume of it. Yeah, it's all the way around. There's a nice slice of pie for you. I don't really think it's fair to judge how good or bad these engines are based on this one example, because this came out of a stolen car that was driven within an inch of its life by someone that didn't care, and why should they? It wasn't even theirs. And I think if you take any of the engines we've torn down on this channel and many others and subject them to what this engine saw, we'd have a similar or perhaps worse result from that overheat. However, The part that failed on this engine fails on a lot of those engines. Those engines are known for two really important things, the timing system and that coolant crossover pipe. Now, I think that's a relatively inexpensive part. However, I'm sure the labor isn't inexpensive. But they made this engine for a long time, and I think they still make a version of this engine. I hope there's a revised design. I hope there's a better part, an upgrade, so that you don't have to worry about this happening to yours. Although I think most people, if they own the car, they're paying some sort of attention to what the dash says. I would hope that. Now, the engine design was really interesting, and I'm glad I had an example to tear down on this channel. It was pretty cool to see how they turned a V8 into a V6. Now, GM did this with the 4.3 Vortec. They took a 5.7, lopped off 2 cylinders, and made a V6. And a lot of people really like those engines. Do people really like these? I don't know. How about you guys? You guys let me know. Is this a great design, or is this kind of just cheap? Is this a cheap way out? The one thing I do have to say is the cars that the 3-liter supercharged come in, I bet it's pretty easy to put a 5-liter supercharged in, and that's 500 horsepower. And I think the trouble associated with these engines is worth it at 500 horsepower, but at 340, that's a tough call. But there are some other brands that have made some supercharged V6 and V8 engines that I just can't remember what. Oh, yeah, the old 113Ks. Gotta love these things. If you want to see a video on this, I'll probably have one next week or so. I'm not fixing it, so no more project cars. I got to draw the line somewhere. I really hope you enjoyed this teardown. If you'd like to buy any parts out of this engine, which is pretty much just external parts and the crank and maybe the cams, that's it. The block would make an interesting coffee table, so if you'd like to build a table out of it, that will be available. I won't throw it in the scrap bin for a while. You can go to importapart.com, or you can email us at importapartsales@gmail.com. If you don't see what you're looking for on our website, you can fill out our part request form, which sends us an email of exactly what it is that you're looking for. As always, I love all the comments, all the feedback, and even the criticism. I love it all, and I'll catch you on the next one.